The rules of your workplace, all the meetings, the way the teams are structured, even performance reviews, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were actually designed. For the last 100 years or so, our ideas about how to run a company have been constantly changing on this massive quest to find the absolute best way to organize people and get things done.
Seriously, think about it for a second. Why do you report to that specific manager? Why are your daily tasks broken down in that particular way? None of this is an accident. It's all the result of different theories, big experiments, and some pretty revolutionary ideas that have totally shaped the way we all work. So in this explainer, we're going to peel back those layers of history to really understand why things are the way they are today.
You can't really get where we are now without knowing how we got here, right? So we're about to take a little trip back in time, a journey through the major eras of management thought. This history, it gives us all the clues we need to understand why our managers make the decisions they do, and it helps us see the logic, or, sometimes the lack of logic, in how our own companies work.
And here it is. This is our map for the journey. We're going to kick things off with the foundational classical viewpoint, then we'll move through the more people-focused behavioral era, and we'll finally land on some of the more complex, modern ideas, like the systems and contingency viewpoints. Each step really builds on the last one, so let's dive in.
Okay, so our story starts in the machine age. Think late 19th, early 20th centuries. The world was industrializing like crazy. And the biggest question for every manager was super simple. How do we make more stuff faster? The goal was pure, absolute efficiency. That's it.
So if you look at our map, we are right here, at the very beginning, in the classical viewpoint. This whole era is defined by this one big idea, that work could be engineered, and that people could be optimized just like they were another cog in a giant factory machine. The seed for this idea actually goes way, way back to Adam Smith in the 1700s. He was observing these pin factories and he saw two different ways of doing things. In what he called the craft style, one worker would do all 18 steps to make a single pin. But in the specialization method, each worker just did one or two simple tasks over and over. The result? A massive, unbelievable increase in how many pins they could make. This was really the birth of job specialization.
Now, this idea got totally supercharged by a guy named Frederick W. Taylor. He's known as the father of scientific management. His core belief was that there was one best way to do any job, and he made it his mission to find it through systematic scientific study. No more guesswork, no more intuition, just pure data.
And he boiled it all down to these four basic principles. First, you study every single part of a task, down to the second. Second, you write down that Beth method into a set of clear rules. Third, you pick workers who have the right skills and you train them on that exact method. And fourth, you set a clear performance level and you pay them more if they beat it. It all sounds so simple, rational, and, well, scientific.
But then reality kicked in. While Taylor's ideas absolutely increased productivity, they had a really serious dark side. Jobs became incredibly boring and repetitive. Workers felt like they were just robots, totally de-skilled and unhappy. And what's worse, when performance shot through the roof, companies often realized they didn't need as many workers, which of course led to layoffs.
And this case from the Franklin Motor Company shows the problem in stark numbers. By using scientific management, their car output exploded by 900%. I mean, just incredible. But now look at the workers' salaries. They only went up by 90%. So all the gains from this new efficiency, they weren't being shared equally. And you can bet the workers definitely noticed.
Around the same time, another thinker, Max Weber, was looking at efficiency, but from a totally different angle. He proposed this idea of bureaucracy as the ideal, most rational way to run a company. And for him, this wasn't about annoying red tape. It was about having a clear hierarchy, formal rules, and, this is the key part, making sure people got jobs based on their skills and merit, not just because of who they knew.
So this purely mechanical view of work just couldn't last forever. The relentless push for efficiency had ignored a fundamental truth. Employees are people. This realization kicked off a revolution in management thinking, shifting the whole focus away from tasks and machines and onto human behavior and motivation.
If we look back at our roadmap, you can see how this next phase grows right out of the last one. We are now officially entering the behavioral viewpoint. This is the moment when psychology and sociology walk onto the factory floor and managers start asking not just how people work, but why.
A major pioneer of this new way of thinking was Mary Parker Follett. Now, she came from a background in social work. So she saw organizations more like communities, and she was really concerned that Taylor's whole scientific approach was completely ignoring the human side of the equation.
Follett pushed for a pretty radical idea, and it's captured perfectly in this quote. She argued that power shouldn't just automatically belong to the person with the fancy title. No, it should go to the person with the most knowledge about the task at hand, even if that person is on the front lines. I mean, for the time, that was a truly revolutionary concept.
And then, a series of experiments came along that changed everything. The Hawthorne studies. Researchers went into a factory to test things like, if we increase the lighting, will productivity go up? But they found something really bizarre. No matter what they changed, more light, less light, productivity went up. The conclusion? It wasn't the lighting at all. It was the attention. Workers performed better simply because they knew someone in management was paying attention and actually seemed to care about them.
This human-first view was later captured perfectly by Douglas McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. So a Theory X manager believes the average employee is lazy, hates their job, and needs to be controlled with strict rules and punishments. But a Theory Y manager? They believe people aren't lazy, that they actually want to do good work, and that a manager's job is just to create an environment where employees can be creative and direct themselves. It's two completely different ways of looking at human nature.
All right. As we move into the second half of the 20th century, management theory starts to get even more sophisticated. The simple answers of the past, it's all about efficiency or it's all about the people, they start to give way to more complex, more nuanced approaches that use data and really see the bigger picture.
For our final stop on the roadmap, we're landing in the modern era with the systems and contingency viewpoints. This is where we finally recognize that an organization doesn't exist in a bubble, and there's no single magic bullet for how to manage people. So the systems viewpoint basically asks us to stop looking at departments in isolation and instead see the entire organization as a living, breathing organism. Every single part, from marketing to finance to production, it's all interconnected. And a change in one area is going to have ripple effects through all the others. This diagram here shows it perfectly. An organization takes in inputs. That's your people, your money, your information. It has what are called transformational processes, its management style and technology, to turn those inputs into outputs like products or services. But, and this is the critical part, it gets feedback from the environment, which then affects the next round of inputs. It's this continuous, dynamic loop. And that leads us right to the contingency viewpoint. This is the ultimate rejection of Frederick Taylor's One Best Way. It basically argues that the most effective way to manage depends entirely on the situation. For example, a tech startup in a market that's changing every 5 minutes needs a very different management style than a stable, predictable government agency. The answer to pretty much every management question becomes, well, it depends. So after this 100-year journey, where does that leave us today? Well, your own workplace is probably a hybrid of all of these theories. You likely have specialized tasks that go all the way back to Adam Smith, performance metrics straight out of Taylor's playbook, team projects inspired by Mary Parker Follett, and a structure that's constantly trying to adapt to its environment, just like contingency theory says it should. In this evolution, it's not over, not by a long shot. As artificial intelligence starts to automate routine tasks and even some pretty complex decision-making, the very nature of what a manager even does is being called into question. And that leads us to our final thought. What's going to be the next great chapter in the story of management? What new theories will pop up to guide companies in a world of human-AI collaboration? That, right there, is the question that the next generation of managers and all of us will have to answer.